we started Downsizers Club, I think about 5 months ago, maybe. We've done about 5 monthly programs so far. We typically have them on the first Thursday of the month on various topics. And this one clearly is one that has captured a lot of people's interest and attention. And we're thrilled that we have two presenters to talk about donating to museums for posterity. So without further ado, well, I'll tell you who they are, then I'll introduce them separately as their time comes up. We have Letha Johnson from the Spencer Research, it's library, isn't it? Museum and library. And then we have Brittany Keegan from the Watkins Community Museum. And we're going to let Letha go first because she has a PowerPoint presentation to share. And Letha has been the curator for the Kansas collection at the Spencer Library since September of 2019. From July 2008 until September 2019, she was the Associate Archivist and Records Manager in University Archives at Spencer. Prior to coming to KU, she worked for over 13 years in the State Archives at the Kansas Historical Society. She is a certified archivist and certified digital archives specialist. And with that, I would love to turn the program over to Letha. Letha, welcome, and thank you so much for being here today.
All right, thank you, Kathy. I'm happy to be here and glad that for this opportunity. And I've seen a few faces that I recognize, so I'm always happy to see that. And let's see here. Hope everyone can see that pretty well there. So basically, what I wanted to do is just give you a brief background on Spencer and then the type of things that we collect in different areas as well, and trying to keep this very short so that there's plenty of time to answer any questions that you have. So briefly, Spencer is a branch of the KU Libraries, and it was named in honor of Kenneth Spencer, who was a KU graduate, and we opened in 1968, and there are 4 different collecting branch or departments within Spencer. The Kansas collection, which is the regional history collection, and it documents the history of Kansas, its people, and the contiguous states, as well as the Great Plains. So topics covered within our collection include agricultural, political, and social movements, economic development, overland trail migration, and then the Kansas collection is also home to our African American experience collections. University Archives is the repository for the records that document the history of the university. It houses not only the official records, but also student campus organizational records. And then also collects the personal papers of faculty and administrators as well. So then next we have the Wilcox collection of contemporary political movements. And that documents the non-mainstream political movements on both the left and the right side, although we have more for the right. But that also is from across the country as well. And then lastly is special collections, and it literally covers everything else in the world. It holds some of the oldest materials that we have, such as cuneiform tablets and a piece of Egyptian papyrus, all the way to modern works of poetry and science fiction. And there, hopefully by the time I get through this, you'll come to realize that there could be considerable, and there is, overlap between the different collections. So, you know, we try to make things that are donated to us, try to figure out what's the most logical place for it there. So next here. So this slide lists the types of personal papers and documents that the archives are interested in collecting, not only from just individuals, but from families as well. And though this list and the ones on the next few slides, they're not all inclusive. So this is just to give you an example of what we collect. And that's also why I strongly recommend that you reach out, you know, to the archives that you think your papers would fit in, you know, whether it's me or someone else, and really talk about what you have with us. Archives, libraries, and museums, we all have collection development policies that kind of outline the types of things that we collect. And so not everything that is offered for donation is accepted, but we may be able to direct you to another institution where that might be a better fit as well. And, you know, one thing that we are commonly offered, but do not accept, unfortunately, is family Bibles. And that's largely because of space limitations. But we are interested in the family history and genealogy that's contained within those Bibles. So we may ask if, you know, you can just provide us with a copy of it, that information, or if you can loan it, the Bible, to us, and we can make a copy to include in our collections. A few other items that are typically not accepted are anything that includes personal financial information, passports, identifications, you know, anything that would have a social security number. And if there is something, you know, donated your materials and we're going through and arranging it to be used by researchers, if we find something that doesn't fit within our collections, we will offer to return it to you, or we can offer it to another institution as well. But the really important thing that I want you to take away from all of this is that we do accept the vast majority of things that are offered to us. So next, so as I had mentioned earlier, University Archives also collects the personal papers of faculty and administrators from KU. And so this is a brief list of some of the types of materials that they collect. And Rebecca Schulte, who's the university archivist, is the person to contact for this if you have those types of records, and her contact information is listed here at the bottom of the slide. And then
There's a,
yes.
Letha, there's a question that is somewhat related to that.
Okay.
Marlene says she has a great deal of music, performance music, and student teaching materials that she would like to donate. And she was thinking she'd donate it to the Department of Music. Would you all help her connect with the Department of Music, or should she connect with them directly? And if so, how would she go about doing that?
Sure. We can definitely help facilitate that. I'm not familiar with anyone really in the department there to see what they would be interested in, but I can definitely, you know, provide some contact information.
Great, thank you.
And so I also wanted to include the types of organizational records that we include, since so many people are involved in various types of organizations. And so here are some of the things that we generally collect from organizations. And again, you know, you may have noticed that there's a lot of overlap from what's listed on these last three slides. And that's, again, also why we, you know, encourage you to reach out to us as you're starting to go through things. You know, we're always happy to answer any questions you have as you're going through that. But you can also, you know, search our holdings to see the types of collections that we do currently have, to help, you know, give you an idea of the things, you know, we may be interested in that may not be listed here. I mean, we do that sometimes ourselves. So, but we're always happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I did want to bring up briefly too, when you do donate something, we'll ask you to complete and sign a deed of gift form. And this transfers the legal ownership of the materials to us. You can also, if there's any copyright or other intellectual property rights, you can donate those as well, or you can maintain those. That's strictly up to you. This is listed here is also just some of the information that's listed on that form for you there. And again, it's something that, as we're going through the donation process, we will talk through this with you as well. So, but why do we want your stuff? So quite simply, it's our job to collect this type of materials so that it represents the everyday lives of citizens and therefore the history of the state and the region. I mean, we highly value this type of information and these collections because we feel it's vital to pass it along to future generations. Listed here are some of the other reasons why we collect this information as well. Excuse me, allergy issues.
It must be that flowering tree behind you.
Yeah. But it's, it may sound kind of, hard to believe what's listed here, but I really feel that this way. I was always a history nerd, I guess you could say. And so that's what drew me into archives. And I just love learning new things all the time. And that's what we get from these personal and family collections. And also for 19 years, I helped run the National History Day program for students in grades 6 through 12 here in Kansas. And, some of the best student projects were based on family and local history. And, some students did projects on relatives who fought in various wars, or they documented their family migration stories to the US. And, and then there's also instances where someone came across someone's name in a newspaper article on some topic, and then they were able to find, a collection either for that individual or their families. And they've just created the most amazing projects with that type of information. And then, we also use material in the classes that we have that, used to come into Spencer. Now we do it all virtually, of course. But, I've used diaries and letters, just to show the students how people felt about things, just what was going on in their daily lives at various time points. And, it's really hard for me to convey to you the feeling I get when I see, something spark in a student. They're looking at something and, they're really understanding the importance, and it just sparks this desire within them to dig in more into archives and just to learn greater context and understanding about those things. So that's, and that's all why we want your stuff. And, so that's the end of the slides that I have. So I can stop sharing or for now and answer any questions.
Okay, well, I have some of the questions coming in could be posed to both of you, I think. Rita wants to know, do you accept personal journals? So there's but the other questions I might save until after Brittany has presented, because they could go either way. And maybe that's a good follow-up question. Where does the Spencer begin and end in terms of, university versus community museum, and how do you all work together?
Sure. Yeah. Well, To answer the first question, yes, we do accept journals. That's something that we find a lot of value in. People do get a lot of information, in just documenting what they're doing on a daily basis and also how they're reacting to different world events and things like that. So journals, yes, we do accept them. And sometimes it's hard to determine kind of the line between where things would fit in a library versus a museum. And in general, we try not to accept too many artifacts. It just kind of depends on the context of the material and itself and what we have to go along with that. And if it would really contribute to the meaning of the material, or is it really something just so large or some things that it's really is better for a museum setting rather than a library setting for it.
Okay. And I was pleasantly surprised to hear you say that you accept most things, because in my background reading, I read that, you have to kind of prepare yourself for rejection sometimes when you take these items that mean so much to you, to a museum. And I wondered, I'm guessing that's because everything is digitalized now, that you can accept, or am I wrong?
No, it's usually, as long as it falls within our collecting parameter, we will accept most of the things. We will, as we have a separate processing department here in Spencer who actually goes through the materials. So will cull through it and, pull out certain publications. And then if it's like duplicates of what we already have, then that's one example of things that we would offer back. But for the most part, by and large, we do end up accepting most of the things that are offered to us. What we have a hard time even right now dealing with, we're working on it, but we do have a hard time accepting digital collections. And so it's something that the libraries doesn't have a lot of capacity for right now. But it's something we're actively working on. It's a part of our strategic plan that we're in year 2 of now. So, but that's also something is depending on what it is, if we have both a hard copy of it and a digital version, well, which is the one that we really need and is the most useful? Because sometimes, particularly if it's an older digital file, then, the hard copy may be the best copy to go with just because of issues with that digital file if it's old enough.
Okay. Does the region of the country matter? I know I asked you this when we talked a week or so ago, because I always assumed it would be, the university, Lawrence, and then Kansas. But are you interested in material from national organizations or just local? This is a question from Lee. Diaries from East Coast childhood are mainly about lives spent in this region.
It depends. So most of the time, for the region, we're most heavily here on Eastern Kansas, but we do accept things from across the state. And then also it's Nebraska, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Colorado is usually where we concentrate on, but we do have some things from the rest of the Great Plains regions. Now, if it's from someone who, moved here from the East Coast and they spent a lot of time here in Kansas and things like that, then sure, we'll go ahead and accept that as part of our collections because it is part of their lives and you want to try and give the fullest picture of their life that you can.
Okay. And David asked, what kind of genealogical information media? I mean, do you accept PowerPoints, images, JPEGs, or what?
Yeah, no, we do accept PowerPoints. Again, it could be something depending on what it is that we may print off, but we do accept JPEGs too. The TIFF files are a better file than a JPEG just because they're not as compressed. So they hold up better over time, but we have many JPEGs as well. So
Okay. Okay. And I promise to get to the rest of the questions. It's just that some of these I think might be more appropriate for Brittany or both of you at the same time.
okay.
So we'll just hold
Sure.
those. Thank you so much. Letha, hang on, and
Sure,
we're
you.
going to switch over to Brittany now. Okay, Brittany Keegan is the curator of the Watkins Community Museum, and she is all about the stuff. She identifies new artifacts for the collection, preserves existing collections. That's one thing we do want to be sure to talk about, is preserving our stuff for donation. And she plans exhibits that bring visitors face to face with our community's history. She enjoys leafing through historic newspapers and asks, did you know Rhode Island Street was home to an ice cream vendor turf war in 1917? And she enjoys using artifacts to connect to life in the past. Bathing suits used to be made of wool. Imagine the smell, she offers. So with that, and I took that from the website, Brittany knows that, I will introduce to you Brittany Keegan. Brittany, take it away and tell us about the Watkins, please.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm so glad to be able to be here and talk a little bit about Watkins and hear Letha talk about the Spencer Research Library, which I'm there all the time doing research for our exhibits as well. So it's always nice to hear about the different collections in the local area. So yeah, I'm at the Watkins Museum. The Watkins Museum is the home of the Douglas County Historical Society. The Douglas County Historical Society's kind of role is specifically to run the Watkins Museum of History, which is where we operate and house the collection. So the Historical Society's been going since the 1930s, but we've had the building I'm in currently since 1975 or so, and have been operating the museum out of the old Watkins Bank building. We're at the corner of 11th and Mass if you have or haven't had a chance to come visit us. So there's going to be a fair amount of overlap with the reasoning and collections that Watkins does versus the Kenneth Spencer Research Library. Our limitation or our guiding principle for the collection is Douglas County specific. So we are looking at, and we only collect things that have a specific tie or relation to the county. Within that, we have a heavy emphasis on Lawrence. We do collect things in the county itself, but there are now a lot of great historical agencies in the county, in Eudora, out in the Wakarusa area, that are doing great work preserving and collecting that history as well. So we're kind of always mindful of what fits our collection versus should be in an institution that makes maybe a little bit more sense or connects to the community in a different way. Since our kind of guiding principle is Douglas County, and since that is kind of a large thing to look at, we really look at things that are telling specific or unique history related to the county and related to Lawrence within that. So local businesses, families that have a history in Lawrence or in Douglas County, local schools, whether they are the former rural schools or in Lawrence itself. Things like property info. We have a lot of questions and get a lot of questions related to people who've bought homes and doing research on their property. So we like to always look in and collect information on that. We happily take in abstracts of title. These are things that are great resources for some family history, property information, those kind of things. And then a big emphasis recently we've had within the collection as part of our mission is to promote civic engagement. This is kind of the idea of using artifacts and information from the past to connect to what's happening in our current day. So we look at all aspects of the idea of civic engagement, whether it is volunteering in local organizations or it is movements and protests and more demonstrations, enacting history, that kind of thing. Or if it's, you know, as I was saying, kind of clubs and organizations that get together and work to beautify the city, those kind of things. There's lots of different aspects of that idea that we pursue. One of the differences for the Watkins that stands out is that we do collect a lot of artifacts, a lot of objects to go along with archival and photographs and manuscript information, things like that. So we do collect material things, and we use a lot of those materials actively with our school programs. We have an active program where field trips and homeschools, we have a pretty active homeschool connection linked to our educational program, that they look at artifacts and use the information about the material and how it's made and what it used to do to help understand a time frame, understand how people lived differently in the past versus today, and understand how things change over time. Even something as simple as like an ice cube tray, of course, used to be, you know, aluminum or metal and have a different function or work a little bit differently than ice makers in refrigerators today. And just kind of exposing students to ideas as simple as that can build understanding of the way the past functioned differently or similarly to today. That's kind of a lot. I know there's, if there's specific questions within there, I know I kind of rattled a few things off. I'm happy to get a little bit more in depth with specific areas if you'd like.
Yes, we do have questions are coming in for you, Brittany, so never fear. Plenty of material here. Okay, so here's Brittany. My understanding is that Watkins doesn't have physical space to accept researchers' notes or records on local history. And parenthetically, she says, embattled Lawrence. Should I donate my research to Spencer instead?
That's a great question. So that Embattled Lawrence project is ongoing. The issue that we have had in the past is that in sometimes having research notes donated, we've had information from other institutions that have been given that shouldn't be in our collection because they should be somewhere else. So that is something that we would have to look through and see as far as what would be useful or what would be able to be in our collection versus the Spencer. And Letha might have thoughts from the Spencer side that would be worth sharing on that as well.
Letha, do you want to chime in?
Sure. Yes, that's something that we try to also be mindful of, is that we're not accepting material that's from collections of other repositories. And it's something that we ask our researchers to be mindful of too when they are donating their research materials as well. And it's just because, not only overlap of materials, but it's also, again, that space issue, trying to help with that. But, we can't own, the material that's legally owned by another institution as well. So there is that implication in all of that as well.
Okay. Brittany, does the Watkins take recordings, videos, or history of local music groups around the year 2000?
Well, that's a great question. We have been collecting more recent, so I would certainly love to have that conversation about things coming from the year 2000, or even I would say our collection kind of starts tapering off somewhere in the 80s. So from the 80s to the present are something we would certainly love to talk about. If it's something that is a recording, a tape or something like that that has a physical media to it, we would certainly be interested, because we do have connections and ways, and we're exploring more ways to digitize more of the collection. We have the similar problem that I think Letha and the Spencer are looking at, in that things that are digital to begin with, we're still trying to figure out how to best record, store, preserve those things, because media formats change so quickly. This is something that the museum took in things like floppy disks years ago, thinking that floppy disk would be a stable technology, and of course it was pretty quickly outdated. So if it does have a physical media format, we would be happy to have that discussion, because of course bands and nightlife and clubs and venues are all so part of community in Lawrence, both people who live in Lawrence for a number of years, or people who go to school here and played in a band, that kind of thing. So it would certainly fit within our mission.
Okay. And kind of along the same lines, Rita wants to know, do you take old flyers and posters of local events such as Busker Fest ads and farm tour brochures?
Yes. Yeah. We had a great partnership a couple years ago with the organizers of Art in the Park, and put on an exhibit of posters and photos from Art in the Park over the years. So Busker Fest, of course, would be one of those great local new traditions that we would be ready and willing to collect around.
Okay. Now, this one, we have two questions. I was saving these for both of you, because who doesn't have the pictures of the deceased relatives, and you have no idea who they are, and yet you cannot throw them away for some reason. It just seems sacrilegious to, just to throw them away. Are you interested in those? I mean, for any reason, if we can't identify the people in them, where they're from, we might not even know what side of the family they're on. Either one of you, go for it, please.
That is very difficult, because unfortunately, the family is the best resource of knowing who that person could be. We've done this, and we have these images in the collection where it's, a cabinet card of someone's great grandfather, and there's no name because the person who knew the name was the grandmother, and she passed away 25 years ago. And it is a difficult situation to be in. Unfortunately, in doing that research, you can never be quite sure of who is in the photo versus who is in the family line that you find in the research or ancestry charting and things like that. So unfortunately, that's something we've shied away from collecting if there is no identity for the photograph.
Letha, how about you? Does the Spencer find any value, maybe even from a historical, photographic, photography aspect, anything? Do you want them?
Well, usually it would still be for us, from the family history aspect of it, so as long as you're relatively confident that it was a member of the family, we will still go ahead and take that. I mean, unfortunately, like Brittany said, it's something that we struggle with though too, because there's limited means for us trying to figure out who the individual may be. But unfortunately, the vast majority of people, I would say, in our photograph collection, and we have over 1 million photographic items in our collections, I would say most of them are not identified. We may have like a family that they're from, or like a group or a event associated with the photograph, but as far as individual people, most of them we don't know.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have someone whose cousin gave them an unlabeled tintype photo of their ancestors, and she asked, shouldn't they go back to Detroit? I'm assuming they're from Detroit, but would a Detroit museum even be interested, maybe the tintype aspect, but should she even bother sending them back to the
Well,
city of origin?
I would say it's definitely worth contacting a museum in Detroit or in somewhere in Michigan where the family might have been from. Um, I would shy away from just sending material to a museum or to an archive or institution. That gets a little tricky as far as the legal right and making sure that the actual change of hand, as Letha was describing with the deed of gift, that is kind of the assuring that you're giving it freely and it's documented within the collection. If things get sent to a museum, you're not able to really follow that process as well as you could. But it's certainly worth contacting a museum in Michigan and saying, my family is from there. I've got this tintype. I'm really interested in finding out if you have information or if this would be something that would fit your collection.
Yeah. And I want to emphasize, because both of you, when we talked in advance, I think both of you mentioned you really want to know in advance what's coming. I mean, you really would like the phone call or someone to email you some files or photographs or whatever. And then you need time if you decide to accept it, and I'll let you explain why, but really want to emphasize, don't just bring a box of stuff down to the museum or the library, right? You want to know, and why is that, Brittany?
Well, there's a couple reasons. One, you as the museum, you or institution, you want to make sure this is something that you can take care of, that it is within the collecting parameters of the institution. I don't know if you can hear that. I've got sirens going by our building right now. If it's something that fits the parameter, if it's something that your institution's going to be able to take care of, just on the basic preservation level. If you show up with, a box, 2 boxes, that kind of thing, every item a museum takes in is a commitment for the museum to take care of that thing. So it's really for the museum or for the institution. I keep saying museum because I'm working there, but for the institution, it's really about the responsibility to make sure the things that come into the collection can be properly cared for.
Okay.
So slowing down that process a little bit allows the museum to make sure there aren't duplicates, to make sure what collections issues there might be, if there's any sort of water damage or anything that would require conservation issues can be addressed, those kind of things.
And that's a perfect segue into the preservation aspect of this, and how people can either maintain, or I don't know if they can improve the condition of their things. You can let me know, but things we can do right now with some of these older items, papers, artifacts. My friend was distraught because her grandmother's cookbook was kind of falling apart. She really wanted that legacy, that cookbook, to be passed down. Wanted to know how to kind of maintain it or repair it even. And I know that's part of your job for the Watkins. Are there any sort of tips that you can share with us so that we might, when we present our things to you, they'll be in better shape, or at least the same shape?
Sure. So what we do at the museum is we end up calling it preventative maintenance. It's these things you do to help to store things so they maintain the condition that they have, that they don't get any worse than they might be. Unfortunately, it's I would say nearly impossible to bring something back. And it's something that I certainly don't have the skill set for. You would need to talk to a professional book binders, book repairers, or art conservators, that kind of thing. That's a very specific, intense studied field of its own. But yeah, there are things to do to preserve the objects, the artifacts, the archives as they are now, to kind of keep them moving into the future as far as being preserved. Keeping them in a cool, dry, dark place. The idea of, if they're in a basement and your basement's prone to flooding, that's not going to be good for obviously the continued life of your family history. If they're if the materials can be stored flat as best they can in what you'll see is either called pH neutral or acid free material. There are just kind of folders. There are, if you look at scrapbooking stores, and actually even places like Michael's and crafting stores are understanding this a little bit better. So you can get what's called museum glass. You can get pH neutral mats or paper material to kind of house and store collections, and that goes a long way in making sure that the collection continues in its current state. Other things you might want to watch for is stacking materials, especially if there's ink or if there's a chance of the materials rubbing together. That can have an adverse effect for both of them, or ink from one can rub onto another. If one paper gets wet, then the rest of the collection is at the same risk. So separate cool, dry place, archival neutral materials, or pH neutral materials are really the best steps to take in assuring the collection.
Okay, thanks. This was our very first question, which happened about 40 minutes ago. But I thought it might be good to ask you both. Are there items, and this really isn't about donating, but Denise wants to know, are there items related to Quantrill's raid that we would not find elsewhere in your collections? Brittany, since you're nodding your head, why don't you start?
Yeah, so I mentioned that the Douglas County Historical Society was founded in the 1930s. Well, there was a movie premiere, the movie called Dark Command, which, if you look over my shoulder here, this is a blown up image of the parade for Dark Command in 1940. But there was a big push, because the movie that premiered was very, very, very loosely about Quantrill's raid, to collect a lot of things related to that early Kansas time period. So we have, and actually, if you have a chance to visit the museum, of course, now it's a little, make good judgments as your personal feelings on that. We are open to the public, masks and social distancing, but we have burnt floorboards. We have things like spinning wheels that families saved from the raid, fused glass because the fire was so hot that it melted the glass, and then we have nails and other things that are related to that time period as well. So we do have specific raid specific artifacts in the collection and on view.
Great. Letha, what have you got from Quantrill's raid?
Well, we would have more of materials related to it, not necessarily objects. So we would have we have some newspaper articles about it, not only just reporting on the raid itself, but, people, they went out and interviewed and talking about that. We have diaries from people who survived the raid and went through it, as well as letters on both people who were here for the raid, but then we've also got in letters from family members, they sent letters, back east to people and talking about the raid. So we have a lot of material related about that as well here in our collections.
Okay. Now I want to get to some of the sort of miscellaneous questions here. I think this one is for you, Brittany. Do you accept records, like phonographic records?
Um, unless there's a very specific tie to Douglas County or Lawrence, no.
Okay.
We have in the past, but it's something that with space constraints and with looking at that tie to our mission, we haven't in recent years.
Okay. This one might stir things up here. Deborah says she has a handmade wool KU blanket from the early 1900s that includes handmade pennants of teams KU played back then. Would she take it to the Spencer or Watkins or the KU sports department for display at the field house?
Well, I would say it's so KU specific that if someone were to call us, we would probably first suggest they get in touch with KU since it is such a unique piece. And I mean, it sounds like a great piece. We would certainly be interested, but it is something that there is such a more direct tie and home for potentially.
Letha, would you agree?
Yes, I would agree with that. And, it is something, those type of things are sometimes accepted in university archives. It's not unheard of for us to have that sort of thing there. And, although, the Booth Hall of Athletics may be interested in it as well. And, we also have a very good working relationship with them, obviously, as well as Brittany at the Watkins. So, if they don't feel like it really fits in with their collecting scope, they refer people to university archives all the time and vice versa.
Okay.
And then we have a great lending relationship as borrowing lending. So if it was something that the Watkins felt would fit really well with an exhibit, we would talk to KU about borrowing it for a short period of time or something like that. So these local institutions do work together fairly well.
Darn, and I was really counting on a turf war to break out, but I guess not. Okay, how about, this is for Letha. Is there a way for people to access the historical information in the Spencer, and what is the best way, especially right now?
Well, we have been working on digitizing more and more of our collections. So, from our webpage, there are links to our digital collections, so you can find out specifically, from all of our different collecting departments, what we have that's available online. And something that's not always thought of that is also a good place to look is our online exhibits, because we do digitize things from our exhibits, and some of those things are available there where they might not be available with our regular digitized collections. But it is a very, very small percentage of our collections that have been digitized. And it's something, we're fortunate here, since we're part of the larger KU libraries, we do have a digitization program. So, but it takes a lot of time to get things digitized, and everything done with it before and after, before it can be made available.
Okay, and Shelley wants to know, and this, Brittany, feel free to chime in on this one too. What about papers, ledgers of local businesses now defunct?
We love those. It's something that there's of course, because Massachusetts Street in the downtown area is such a gathering place still. People have a lot of questions about past businesses in different areas, and not to say that that business was in the downtown area, that's just sort of an example. But yeah, businesses in Douglas County and in Lawrence are things that we have a fairly extensive collection of, and look to continue collecting in the future.
Okay. This is a good, you all ask excellent questions, by the way. Sign you all up for this. Pat wants to know, once donated, would a person continue to have access to the item? For instance, take family and friends to see it when it is in the museum's possession.
It's a great question. We've had this before. If someone contacts us ahead, we could potentially make arrangements, but it's not something that we do a lot, and it's something that gets kind of difficult to do, especially in thinking about the preservation of collections. The more you move them, the more risk there can be. So we don't do it a lot, is the answer.
Okay. Letha, is your answer somewhat the same?
No, since most of our materials are more